Well, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel so excited to have this conversation with you. I'm a big fan, and this just couldn't be a better time to have it.
Yeah, and I'm so looking forward to people hearing about what you're up to now, and what's going on and how it all came to be. But I wanted to first start with just kind of getting an understanding of how did you get started in your career? You're a stylist by trade. How did you get started?
Well, I was very lucky. I got a job at Vogue as a fashion assistant straight out of college, and sort of worked my way up in magazines till I was the senior fashion editor at Mademoiselle magazine. May she rest. I loved that magazine. I hope someday they bring it back. And then I got fired, and I spent a year trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And then auditioned for some show that I didn't really understand and didn't really know whether it was BBC or TLC or ABC or something with a C. And 11 years later, I had been on What Not to Wear that entire time, which led to a ton of opportunities. And I got to be the brand spokesperson for, companies like Pantene and Lee Jeans and Woolite and things like that. And it was an incredibly interesting journey. And I've written a couple of books, and I will say that after What Not to Wear, I took about a year to work on a talk show that was never made, sadly. And then I went on to do Love, Lust, or Run, which was a different type of transformation show. And then about 2016, I started to experience real burnout. It started just as I didn't want to get off the couch. And then it became health issues. I had to have pretty extensive spine surgery, which also led to both physical rehab and real psychological depression. I started perimenopause, and then my father got sick and he passed away. And that sort of cut me off at the knees. And I started to think a lot about mental health, and I started to think about sort of what was happening to me. I turned 50. And a lot of what I think is sort of what I would call an existential crisis started to take place for me. And it was for me, there was a real sense of identity crisis, loss of agency in my own life. This sense that I was losing my identity. And I may have said that before already. It's the brain fog. Sorry. But what wound up happening for me was the pandemic, right? And the pandemic happened to all of us. But what happened during the pandemic for me was this real mind shift about where I wanted to go in terms of what was my kernel of truth, right? I wanted to do more television shows, and I wanted to do them about women in middle age, really because I think it is an underserved community, and because there's a lot to do there in terms of what transformation means. It's not just style. There were so many things that I was thinking about, like pivoting careers, or what it's like to be our age and raise kids and have to deal with elder care or lose a parent, or empty nesting and losing a parent. And that real kind of bizarre thing that happens in middle age where you start to feel completely crazy, right? I mean, really on so many different levels, physically, psychologically, and in some senses, I think you can really be demoralized by this time of life. And this sense of kind of losing cultural relevancy. And you don't have to be on a television show or not be on a television show to feel that.
No question.
So there was this moment where a company called ARFA started a brand called State of Menopause that I became a beta tester for, me and 100 different women, about the kinds of products that we would want to see for perimenopausal and menopausal women. And I was a very noisy beta tester. I had a lot to say about the products, about the packaging, about the messaging. And when the parent company decided to pivot and go in a different direction, they had two brands that they didn't want to see orphaned. And the other one is an incredible brand. It's called Hiki, but it's very Gen Z oriented. It's very about genderless deodorant. And if I'm being frank, like I'll use Secret or Old Spice or something natural. Like, to me that didn't speak to me in the same way. But State of Menopause did. And the opportunity to acquire the company as a standalone company was something that I went into very deep discussions with the founders about. And I truly felt this sense of, why is this happening now? What is the reason behind this now? What is this opportunity about? And for me, I had to go back to like, what is my kernel of truth? What has been the one thing that has run through my entire career as a magazine editor, as a style presenter, as a style expert, is raising other people's sense of self-esteem, self-acceptance, but even more importantly, sense of self. And I really felt like in my own sense of growth, right, there is this moment for this moment in time that feels so unstable. And I could actually, with this choice to take over the company, use it to show women our age that a career pivot is possible, that can continue to uphold the values that you hold as an individual or that you've held throughout your career. And certainly when you've gained some sort of audience in the public eye, that you can lead them in a different direction. Now, that's not to say I don't love style. Of course I love style. And that's part of what our manifesto or mantras are at the company. But for me, it was really this sense of, what can I do where I am to talk to the people I want to talk to? And that's how this all came about.
Well, wow. There's a lot there. And I want to unpack some of it, because I think you said so many things that had like questions. But there's one that keeps coming to me as you're talking. You have a strong sense of self-awareness, right? When you said, I had to go back and think about, what was that consistent theme? What was that? This is something we hear from women that all the time, that they struggle with building a sense of self-awareness. So can you talk a little bit about does that come naturally to you? Do you have a practice for self-awareness? How do you develop that? Because to me, that is the starting point of everything else. You have to be plugged in to what's going on with you in order for you to do the things that you want to do with your life. So how do you do that?
It's such a great question. And I wish there was a simple answer. And you can always tell me to be quiet, because I could talk forever about everything. So
no, please go for it.
A little bit more succinct in my answer. Self-awareness is a journey like any other. And if I'm really being honest, I mean, look, I've been in therapy for lots of my life, and I think that is very helpful for some people. And if it is something that you can get and is available to you, I really recommend it, because I think it's important to talk about hard things. But for me, I will say that my self-awareness really started sort of in the middle of What Not to Wear. When I was there, a lot of the sort of negative self-talk that I would just run like a track in my head started to make me, at first I was like very, very serious about being an expert, right, on television. I was very worried that it would not come off that I was authoritative enough. And about halfway through, I started to realize like I had no sense of humor about the job, no sense of humor about myself. And yet I was always sort of beating myself up about what I did right or what I did wrong.
Right.
But I started to recognize that what we were actually doing on the show was not only just help people sort of see the power of transformation, but do that with a real sense of true compassion. And I thought, if I can do this every day for other people, why am I not applying that kind of compassion to myself?
Right.
And if I took that one moment to think, I don't let anybody come on this show and beat themselves up.
Right.
Why am I doing it to myself? What a waste of mental energy, when I could put that energy towards really doing what I want to do, which is continue to be compassionate and kind and constructively critical, right? Which is, when I say that, I say constructive criticism is about showing people options. So, if you think that, which is something that I've always said, like if something isn't flattering on you, what's another option to prove my point, right?
Right.
That's the same way that I feel about everything. Constructive criticism, compassion, kindness, all of these things engender trust. And you want that in any phase of your life. You want that with your friends,
Right.
you want that with your family, you want that for the company that you work for or that you're building. And you certainly want that trust between you and any audience that you have. I mean, everybody is their own brand now that, thanks to having an Instagram account.
Right.
And what is it that you want to put out into the world, and what do you want to get back from that?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think you happen to have been working. It's interesting you say that it wasn't something that naturally came to you, this idea of self-awareness, that you really kind of tapped into it when you were halfway through your experience at What Not to Wear.
Yeah, and I was in my mid-30s. This is, we go through a lot of life, I think, with blinders on. We forget that, we have our own prejudices, we have our own belief systems that come from, how we're raised, where we come from. It takes a lot to overcome your own blinders. It takes a lot to overcome your own set of beliefs. That requires true compassion. And that was part and parcel of my job. So I developed and really honed my skills in what compassion means by being on that show. And that is something that then, when you realize that that is something that you're doing for others, if you are giving so much of yourself and not giving to yourself, you recognize what a gap there is between what you say and what you believe.
Yeah.
If you can see the potential in other people, you have to be able to see it in yourself as well.
Right. Well, and it's giving yourself some grace, right? And I think as women, we are very hard on ourselves. We are earnest. We want things to be right. We want them to be good. I mean, I always think about what they say about, you talk to hiring leaders in big companies, and they say that on average, a woman won't apply for a job until she has 100% of the qualifications. Like, she's got everything ticking off every box, whereas men will apply for that job when they have only 60% of the qualifications.
I'm surprised it's 60% because frankly, I've seen lots of guys who maybe 25 if we're lucky. And I will be honest with you, this new role for me, being a CEO, is very different from what I've done before. I mean, I have expertise in style. And I certainly have been more than just a brand ambassador. I've done creative brand direction, but this is something very different. And I will tell you, just because you haven't, it's like, I had to ask myself, well, how am I going to do this? How am I going to be a CEO? What does it mean to be a CEO? What does it mean to lead a company? What does it mean to run a company?
Right.
How can I do this? I don't know if I can do this. I've never done this before. And then I thought, well, no CEO in the world started thinking, I'm a CEO.
Right.
You learn as you go, you play to your strengths, and you create a team of people who are stronger and smarter than you are. And I was taught that my whole life. Well, I can do that now.
Yes.
And I love the idea of being able to lead, not only from a place of compassion, but from a place of true understanding. Yes. I have had perimenopausal symptoms that have been quite severe for the last 5 years. Wow. Having spine surgery, losing my father, and frankly, feeling like I was losing my mind. I would be in the middle of a sentence and forget what I was saying, which I still do. I wake up in the middle of the night with night sweats, things that are inconvenient. But when you look at what is actually happening physiologically in terms of perimenopause, there is a lot to unpack. And 85% of women will experience some symptoms. But to be honest, it's the really severe symptoms, the ones for people who can't go on hormones, let's say, that really screw with our sense of identity and just sense of being well. Right. And so there is something so important that this conversation is starting. I'm not a trailblazer. I think that there are a lot of people talking about this, but I do think that it's finally getting at least some of the attention that it deserves. But, people say to me all the time, like, oh, you seem so confident. Well, I mean, look, I have confidence in a lot of areas, but going to investor meetings for the first time, that I'm like, am I saying the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Do I seem like a CEO? And I'm like, why am I questioning myself? I know how good I am. I know how good this is.
Yes.
But all of these feelings that I think women are truly taught from such an early age, we are so empathic. We are constantly questioning ourselves. And I actually think that that is something we should lead with. We should lead with what we feel insecure about, talk about those things until we can see them for what they are, which are really ways to pivot into true confidence and understanding of oneself.
Right. How have you seen this conversation shifting? Right. So, we talked a couple of minutes before we were starting, and what we have seen is that this is a topic that women, obviously every woman goes through it at some point. And now, when it's not just women who are going through it, right? There's a whole other, there are lots of the symptoms that you experience in terms of menopause.
That is correct.
And so there are a lot of people suffering.
Yes. And
why are we suffering? Why are women not talking? Why are people not talking about this? What do you think that is?
Well, I think the kernel of it is shame. All right. And I think that, I want to be very clear in that we are a company that really wants to be rapid relief and innovative solutions for menopausal symptoms. And obviously for most people, that is going to be age, but that's not all people, right? You have all of these health issues: breast cancer, a radical hysterectomy, premature ovarian insufficiency, endometriosis, chemotherapy, that will push you into menopause and make you feel even worse on top of what you're already experiencing.
Right.
And plus, there are people going through gender transitions, and non-binary people who are going to experience these symptoms that are sort of antithetical to who they feel as a person. So it is really important that we look at what these symptoms are. This is a huge population, right? When you talk about age, health, and gender. But I think the shame around it is that there is such a loss of identity and agency. And that really does start with really separating menopause from age, because there, unfortunately, for people who come to menopause because of age, we lump it in together with this kind of existential crisis, right? Midlife crisis, if you will. And so menopause becomes almost like the physiological response to how badly we feel about aging. And one, we have to reframe the conversation of aging, because when I look at Beverly Cleary, like we were talking about, she's living to be 104. Our lifespans are so much longer. And as women, we're going to live a lot longer.
Right.
You cannot look at 50 or 51 or, which is sort of the average age that menopause can start, but it can start as early as 39, and think, well, that's it. I'm done. I'm over. Like, no. Our mother's generation, maybe even earlier than that, you had menopause and then you died. So there was no real discussion around it. And I joke around that we are not your mother's menopause company because she didn't have one. We were not supposed to change the talk about the change, right? We weren't even supposed to talk about the change.
Right.
So for me, it's about reframing, one, what these symptoms are, and educating and informing a consumer so she or they know what they want in terms of a product fit and in terms of what is best for them, because we do forget in this time of life that we do have agency to choose what we want to do with our health, what we want to do about our health, whether we want holistic medicine or functional medicine or whatever that looks like. But to take menopause as something seriously, I call it the kind of the final frontier of hormonal health. But it's a journey that women have had to deal with their entire lives, whether it's puberty or pregnancy or post-pregnancy.
Right.
And we're starting to see so much conversation around women's health generally, right? So, now we're telling young women, don't be embarrassed about getting your period. We're telling pregnant women, it's not just what to expect when you're expecting, it's all the things that you don't expect. And, sort of postpartum depression, things that were sort of hidden from us.
Mm-hmm.
We are
Mm-hmm.
bringing into the light. And a friend of mine said this to me, and I love it. We are, industries across women's health are innovating for the darkness, for the things that have not been brought to light, that we need to shine a light on, and not just normalize the conversation, but optimize the conversation around so that women feel seen.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of this has just been through a patriarchal lens of, hysterical women, or when women have an expiration date. And that's simply because they don't have the same sort of hormonal struggles that we do. And I don't want to exclude men from this conversation, because I think we all need more compassion and understanding around this issue. But the shame, it can be so overwhelming. The loss of sense of self can be so overwhelming. The loss of agency, so overwhelming that, I found myself kind of recoiling. I found myself sort of hiding and feeling very introverted and embarrassed if, I was in the middle of a conversation and it looked like I took a shower just because I started to have such an incredible hot flash. Insomnia was making me crazy. There's a finite number of sheep you can count. Let's be honest.
Yes.
And not get anywhere. It
Right.
wasn't any closer to sleep. And I just think that there's too much about this that is, the way that we talk about this is almost a little too earnest. I think that we've forgotten that the best way to deal with hard things is to be a little bit irreverent and have humor, surrounding. So one of our taglines at the company is, the only thing you want dry in menopause is your martini, because that's how it's really. And, we want to talk about that kind of education, and we want to talk about that kind of information, but we also want to celebrate where you are and who you are for what you are. Yeah. And this idea that menopause takes away from who you are, to me, is, it's something we have to change. We absolutely have to change this conversation, and it's starting. I mean, there was a huge article in Fast Company about companies that are doing this, and I think that we're getting there, because we are also, as Gen X, we're also a generation of people who are glass ceiling breakers generally. Yeah. And I will say that I believe so strongly kind of in multi-generational mentorship, because my ability to be transparent about where I was physically or mentally really came from watching young people do that themselves. And I feel very strongly that they have given us permission as our generation to start doing some of that work ourselves. Yes. And, right? I mean, it's like talking about like menopause. Right. Seems very outdated to me, considering who we are as achievers, as breadwinners, as people who really understand that age and experience are essential, and we bring something to the table.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I have to tell you, Stacy, that when you talked about the hormonal journey that we go on, that women go on in their lifetime, and this is part of the journey, I thought to myself, yes, that is the thing. Why is this not something we can talk about? We are allowed to talk about some of the other things, but we're not allowed to talk about this, or we haven't been talking about this.
Right. We just haven't gotten there yet. I mean, it's sort of like the fact that it has taken us till 2020 to have a second commander in chief who is a woman, right? Yes. And a woman of color. Yes. And when we talk about health, it's not just the fact that women's health is overlooked. I mean, when we talk about women of color, Black and brown and indigenous women who are getting absolutely no care that they at the level that they deserve, I think is really when we have to start looking at all the things we're not talking about. Right. And it's also very important for me as a CEO to stand for a brand that sees where these struggles are happening, both like socioeconomically and racially. And I feel very strongly that it's like, yes, this is part of the journey, but how are women helping women? How are we lifting each other up? And how can we be our best allies for each other?
Yeah. Well, and that there is so much comfort too in knowing is that you're not alone, right? And that's why I also love one of the elements that I have heard you talk about as it relates to the company, your company, is this desire to build the community and build a community around this. And that resonates so much with me as a woman, because community, in terms of like how we as women will go through all of these things in life, everything in life, whether it's a health related issue, an emotional issue, the support of women.
Issue. Yeah.
Yes, the support of women is, I think, just so there is nothing like the support of other women, which is, I know I'm preaching to the choir when I tell you that, but that's what resonates with me so much about what you're doing with State of Menopause, that you are trying to, from the beginning, build a community around this, build community around it, and engaging women and saying, hey, we want you to be part of this process. Tell us.
The company was started, right? Yeah. I mean, before I owned the company, I was a beta tester. 100 women were asked their thoughts, their feelings, their preferences when it came to what they wanted to see in product, which is really, truly how brands need to operate.
Yes.
And the reason that I decided to take this on, another reason, was that, I had a hand in creating these products. I already knew that they worked. So you don't have to tell me on something that I already love. And even as a brand spokesperson, I would never take on a company that I didn't already believe in the product. So if you have to media train me for something, then I'm not doing it. That's first and foremost. But what I loved was that this company was already talking to a collective of women, and really asking for their opinions. And what resonated with me about that is the products that were created because of them. Yeah. So when you talk about community, I thought this is such an interesting way to start community, by starting with a solution to a problem before the conversation starts, right? So I know that there are so many women who are ready to have this conversation, or who want to have this conversation, but it's one thing to say, yuck, oh my God, hot flashes, right? I know, right? That's one thing. But to be able to say, oh my God, hot flashes. Hey, have you tried this? This worked for me. That's like talking to your best friend. And that's the kind of company that I really believe is going to succeed in this market. And you want to do that. I feel very fortunate in the fact that I have had a very large audience of people that I've built trust with over time by telling you the truth. Like, that color ain't great. Let's try something else. It is the same thing here. And honestly, I think one of the, I think Sarah Blakely, who founded Spanx, is a perfect example of this. She had a problem that she needed to fix, that she wanted to fix. And it resonated with billions of women, right? That is sort of how I felt about this company. Some company that was created before me saw this need, and I could take up this mantle. And when you talk about community, yes, I don't want to be a company that just sells product. I want to be a company that you come to because you already know our first line of defense is there to help you.
Yeah. Well, okay. I want to take a step back, if we can, and talk a little bit about you and your younger self. What were you like as a child when you were growing up? What kind of kid were you?
I am still an ambivert. I'm really an introvert who like masquerades as an extrovert. And I think I was that way as a kid too. I was like very, very quiet in school, but sort of, more myself at home. My dad taught me to read when I was very young. So I had a book in my hand by 2.5, and, I was always screaming out signs and things like that. But, in terms of, I guess, like, I only wore purple till I was about 5. I had a very distinct sense of style. That is true. I was Dorothy every Halloween for like 6 years because I hated gingham, but I loved those ruby slippers. So anything with sparkle was really attractive to me, and it informed actually what when I was young. This is really before I knew that, that being a sex worker was even a possibility. I wanted to wear fishnet stockings in a full-time job. So I thought cocktail waitress. That was my ultimate goal in terms of where I wanted to go style-wise and where I wanted my career to head. Now, sadly, that did not happen. I do make a mean cocktail. I will say that. I am a great mixologist, but
Yep.
didn't quite go in the direction that I wanted.
Yeah. So when you got to the point, you're, along the way, you've talked about your dad teaching you how to read. You have such a strong cohort of women around you in your life. I know that, those relationships seem to be very important to you. What is the role of women? What role do women play in your life?
I mean, they play every role in my life in every kind of way. They are advisors to me. I mean, first I should say I have a girlfriend, so romantic is probably the number one. But I would say, in terms of, they are my advisors, they are my cheerleaders, they are my supporters, they are my sounding boards, they are my safety nets.
Yeah.
And, the idea that it's an antiquated idea to think of women as competition.
Yes.
And I think that we see that more and more, but certainly for our generation, I feel like I was taught, only one woman can win. Only one woman can win the date they want. Only one woman can marry the person they want. Only one woman gets the job they want. Instead of thinking much more organically about the fact that we are so much more of a force when we are together, as opposed to trying to beat each other down. And again, just not to bring this back totally to, sort of career stuff, but that's what brands need to stand for as well. All ships rise together. And certainly in this market, when it comes to menopause, there are lots of little companies that are sprouting up, and we need to band together. There is a huge need. There is not one company that gets to win all. I think it is about, what are we doing for this community that benefits the needs, the huge needs of all of this community.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you said that. Obviously I have seen this evolve in terms of how women are perceiving other women. And it does strike me as a little bit counterintuitive that for so long women have felt that there is just one spot. And so you have to compete with somebody else for that one spot. Because when I think about, the women in my life, they absolutely have been incredibly supportive and it's been surprising to me when Hillary was running for president, we were surveying our community, and we have 250,000 women who are part of our community, and we were surveying them and asking them.
Feet, by the way, just a little hats off to you and what you've created.
Oh. Well, thank you. I mean, and it's very much been built by word of mouth. Women find out about us and then they say, hey, you should check this out. So we've grown from women. And the thing that we were hearing, though, this is prior to the 2016 election, was that women were feeling that there was still a pervasive sentiment that a woman could not make a good president for many of the things that you talk about as it relates to menopause, right? Well, it's hormonal.
She's crazy. Oh my God, if she has the new codes, what will happen? Right.
Right. I mean, and that's not that long ago. We're talking 5 years ago.
We're still fighting this battle. And, Hillary is a controversial figure for this, because, I think that, I mean, obviously, I wanted a woman president more than I've ever wanted anything, and I still saw a lot of pushback with people when it came to her, and women, not because they thought that she was incompetent, but because they didn't like her.
Right.
And that's when that's when we have to get into this other thing about likability.
Yes. And how women are judged versus a man doing the same exact thing, right?
That is right.
We judge women more harshly.
We judge women more harshly, and we would, I mean, Hillary was criticized for being, stone cold and not compassionate enough. But if she had shed one tear, And then she would have been too emotional.
Right.
So, again, it is the way that we are looking at society, and we have been taught and internalized to look at society through this patriarchal lens, that what women's behavior is predicated on is somehow less intellectual or well-grounded than a man's, because we are more empathic, more compassionate, and have a full range of emotions that we pull from in all of our communication. Yeah. And to say that that's a weakness is ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous.
Right. Well, and that is there. It is something different that we bring to the table, and we have not really yet been able to explore that, right? As a country, as it relates to women in these most senior positions within the government, we've not been able to explore that. But as we said, maybe now that we have a female vice president.
Exactly. And
maybe
also,
we're on a path.
Maybe we're on a path. I mean, I certainly hope that we're on a path. I hope that we're on a path in lots of ways. And I think, we can't ignore what this pandemic year has done in terms of raising issues that needed much, much more amplification to the surface, right? Yeah. I mean, sheltering in place, watching the news, learning about what happened. I mean, Derek Chauvin being sentenced yesterday was both painful, deeply painful, and also just an indication of where we need to go when it comes to this sense of community responsibility and taking care of one another. Yeah. And I think that all of these discussions that you're having, which are so intelligent and so necessary with your community and other communities, this is where it begins, but this can't be where it ends. And this is why I think when one of the things I felt so strongly when I started talking on Instagram about what it means to be a CEO for me, is that we as a brand take a stance when it comes to issues that are bigger than anything that we do or sell. Right. And that is truly how I want my community to be. That's how my community is with my friends, with my family. And I see this brand as an extension of that. And it is essential that we start putting more women in roles of power in order to show the way that leading can look. Yeah. It does not have to look like it's looked for the last, cajillion years.
Yes. Right. And if you can see it, you can be it, right? That's what they say. And that's why it's so important for us to have a female vice president. It is so important for us to have female CEOs like yourself. It is so important for women, girls to see that this is possible, and that this is, that it's normal, normal, and that it's not like, it means that, that you're giving up something else, or that it just means that this is how you're contributing. This is how you are contributing to the world around you.
Yeah, and I agree. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, but that to me is the thing. I mean, this is obviously, we're both so passionate about this topic, but that's the thing to me that always, as a Gen Xer, always drove me crazy about when people would say, oh, you have a career, so you're giving up something else. We are human beings, and we are meant to bring something to this world, right? We all are meant to bring something special to this world and to contribute. And so what is it that we bring to the world to contribute? And
I don't think that you can qualify that by saying it's, somebody once said to me, oh, you didn't get married because you're married to your career. And I was like, shut the fuck up. Because honestly, I am not married to my career. That is what I am contributing with my life. That was my choice. Yes. And the idea that it's one or the other, you can have it all. All of these things that we say to women, they're so detrimental. Instead of saying, be who you are. Come as you are, contribute what you want and what you feel most passionately about. Why do we have to make these choices? And some of them are based on, sociobiology, right? We have uteruses, or maybe we don't. But the point is, as women, we are considered the people who make life. Well, I think that's so fascinating. Like that somehow puts us in this box or in this role.
Yeah.
But first of all, it's not just going to be, biological women who are going to be able to have children. Soon it's going to be lots of different genders.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the first thing. The second thing is that I don't want to be beheld to this old-fashioned notion that as a woman, I was meant to have children, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was something I had to fight in my generation.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I didn't want to have kids. But
Mm-hmm.
this idea that I'm then married to my job because I didn't get married and have children is ludicrous to me. It's conflating metaphors, right?
Yes.
My job is my job.
Yes.
If I want to marry somebody, it will probably be a person. Do you know what I mean? Like
right.
it's not a career. A career, like, you would never say that to a man. You would never say you're married to your job. I mean, there's just something about the way that we look through this lens of women being mothers and nurturers. That's their place. That's their box.
Yes.
And it annoys me in the way that we look at any evolution in a woman's life. This idea that I was talent and now I'm a CEO. Well, why not? I mean, why do I have to stay in my lane? If I know that I want to contribute something and I have something to say that I think can help benefit people, why do I have to stay in this box? Because you think I should be there.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask you a question right now, but I feel like I like talking with you. I kind of have a sense for what you might say, but I am curious. What do you think your superpower is?
Oh God, I have no idea. I mean, I wish I could fly. It would save so much in air travel. I don't know what my superpower is. I mean, I hope that my superpower is being relatable.
Mm-hmm.
I really, if I had any wish, it would be that. And part of the reason that I feel that is even all of the brands, even in magazines, even in television, the catchphrase in terms of marketing always was, be aspirational but attainable. Be aspirational but attainable, which basically to me was make people insecure, but just close enough so that they'll go buy the new eyeliners, so that they'll buy this thing, right? You're making them pretend that they can be somebody else just by buying this thing. And my mantra is attainable and maintainable. I want you to just be who you are, not who you were, who you are, and to be able to accept evolution of yourself in every incarnation at any moment in your life. And if I can impart that kind of message, both through my words and my actions, then I would call that a superpower.
I love that. And you're the first person who said that, I think. Because I ask this question of our guests all the time. And I think it's your perspective is probably also somewhat driven by the fact that you spent years on television and you have an understanding of what it takes to keep people engaged in what it is that you do. And that's,
I mean, I wouldn't have even said that, I would hope that television sort of came because of that. But I would hope that is something that I already possessed as sort of a personality trait that allowed me to be on television, not something that I learned because of television. And which means that I am able to do that across different platforms. And we live in a different world. The 2002 world of reality television no longer exists. And so if I couldn't get through to people on the kinds of shows that I wanted to make, if networks didn't think that they had legs or whatever it was, look, I hope in the same way that, some people said no to the idea of middle-age transformation, there will be channels and networks that do that in the future. But for now, for me, what this really became about was, okay, well, what is the vehicle to have these conversations? And actually the vehicle is to lead them. It's to lead these conversations and whatever form that takes. And because for me, perimenopause was so difficult, and because I heard from so many of my friends, do I go on hormones? Do I not? There's no information. I don't know what to do. Or friends who have suffered breast cancer or something that made them feel less than, to then go into a situation where they had absolutely no understanding. They were armed with no information and ammunition on how to cope and deal with these symptoms is ridiculous. It's like, I always say that, learning what your personal style is your ammunition, right?
Yeah.
It's you controlling the narrative. You get that sense of agency. If you don't have that with your health, I mean, it can leave you feeling completely lost.
Yes.
So I look at them as very strongly connected.
Yeah.
We are, I look at this company as trying to solve for external symptoms that shift internal psychology about aging, about our health situations, about our gender situations, and being able to look at them through a new lens. It's time. It is absolutely time.
I could not agree with you more. What do you think, what do you wish is something you knew, let's say in your 30s, in your early 40s, about that you wish someone had told you so that you could be better prepared for what was going to happen as you got closer to menopause?
Well, I mean, God, that list is endless, right? What to expect would have been a big heads up, but it's not just, and I've started to talk a little bit about this on social, this idea of, I wish I'd known that osteoporosis can start in menopause, so I would have started strength training earlier, right? There are things like that. But what I wish somebody would have said was, one, you're not done at any stage of life until you're in the ground. And that you are allowed to evolve in whatever way, shape, or form you feel works for your life. And whether that's a job pivot, or you decide to have children later in life, or anything, start your own company, it doesn't matter. It's just this idea that we hold ourselves to standards that don't make any sense. We hold ourselves to standards that were set by somebody else. And this idea that you can have agency and you can choose the direction that you want your life to go is always available to you. Just the same way that you can stop wearing schlumpy dresses and put on like a dope jumpsuit. Same thing. It is the same thing.
I love that. I love that. And you know what? There is a difference, right? In terms of when you take that personal agency, when you say to yourself, I have a choice here. Yeah. It's unbelievable what that opens up. It opens, and I think frequently people feel so painted into a corner, and that's sometimes it's not the case, right? It's not the case that you're actually stuck and you can't figure out a way. And that's what I was going to say to you. I think that that's one of your superpowers, is that you have an ability to see outside of what a maybe typical kind of box that somebody puts themselves into, how things could be different, and then you break down that barrier. I think just listening to you talk, that is something that comes across, and it's a gift, because so many women I know struggle with that. How do you change your perspective about something to say to yourself, I do have the power to change this?
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that. I think that there are two reasons that I can look at in my own life for that. One is that I had two pretty successful careers. So the idea of always having to stay in one place didn't ever really make sense to me. And also, I think the reason that I really did lose my sense of purpose, and I can't sort of state that strongly enough. Like I did have my midlife crisis, but I think that it's actually essential to have that crisis in order to have a midlife renaissance. And I think that crisis is an incredible moment where you can look at your life and say, what am I doing here? Right. Everybody has taught me my entire life to, value things like youth and beauty and wealth. Those are not my standards. What are my standards? And honestly, the other thing is that I've never checked a box. I've never been the right thing or the right person or cool enough or funny enough or anything enough. I never, or I was too much of one of those things, right? Or any of those things. This idea that you could put me in a box sort of never really worked out for me. Right. So I like the idea of just being who I am. And if you like me, great. Then we will figure out a wonderful way to communicate. If you are open to sort of the idea of evolution in yourself, you've got me as your ally. You've got me.
Yeah. Stacy, thank you for spending this time with us. If people want to follow your journey and follow what you're doing with your new venture, State of Menopause, how can they do that?
Okay. Well, on Instagram, you can follow at Shop State of, and on Facebook as well. And you can always go to stateofmenopause.com and sign up for our newsletter, because that is coming, and I am writing the very first one myself. And then you can follow me at Stacy London Real on Instagram, Stacy London on Twitter and Facebook. I'm on Clubhouse now, I think. Yeah, I'm on Clubhouse now. And I'm Stacy London on Clubhouse. Guys, I'm going to be honest. I can't get into TikTok. I got into like a TikTok K-hole, and I have to tell you, I was like, there's so much going on in America that I don't need to know about. So that's not where I'm going to be. But honestly, as we grow stateofmenopause.com, we plan to have our own chat rooms, and we're certainly, we also have menopause.com, where that is going to be our information and education site.
Awesome.
And yes, that site was available in 2019, and that does tell you something, doesn't it?
Wow. I was going to say, did you buy that from someone? That's insane that in 2019 they were able to acquire that. Wow. What does that say?
What does that say?
Well, it says that you guys are going to take advantage of helping all these women who are out there who need help with this, and all the people who need help with this.
And also, I want to be the kind of company that will recommend brands to you that have nothing to do with us. That, if they make something that we don't, and we know that it can help this community, we will be there for that company and that product. And certainly even things not related to menopausal symptoms. I mean, again, that's what you want. You want your friends to tell you what's good. And for the friends that I have and the friends that I continue to make, that is my job. That's my job.
I love that. Well, Stacy, thank you so much for joining us today.
And it was really my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure. Can't wait to see what you do with this company. It's going to be great stuff.
I'm excited.